Welcome, brother.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Great to be back, to see familiar faces. Shalom, everybody, and thank you so much for coming, for this intro and everything. And today, what we're going to do is this song. Can you hear me? Yeah. Oops. No. Okay. All right, perfect. You've done that before, haven't you?
Well,
yeah, just a bit.
They do this to me all the time. Yank on my ear.
You and my mom.
Try that.
Is that good? Yeah, okay. That works. Don't worry.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. See, if Moses had that, we wouldn't walk for 40 years in the desert, now would we? Yeah. Horrible navigation, really horrible. So what we're going to do today, we're going to dive into scriptures and find the physical evidence of the Bible. Now, all of us here know that the Word of God is true. When we read the Bible, and if it says in the Bible that it happened, then it happened. There's no question asked. We know that. But there's one thing to believe that without seeing it, and there's another thing to see it in your own eyes. And once you see the truth of the Bible with your own eyes, it becomes from a faith to a fact. And when we teach our children the moral values of the Bible, and when we read the scriptures and we recite stories of the Bible to illustrate our lives today, when you see the real evidence of those stories, it puts it in a completely different perspective. I can tell you, if you're ever going to go to Greece and you're going to go to Mount Olympus, you're not going to find Zeus over there. I tried. He wasn't there. If you go to Jerusalem, you will find the truth of the Bible. Now, Israel has 37,000 archaeological sites. 37,000. Okay? The country is about the same size of New Jersey. That's basically it. Our entire Sea of Galilee is the size of Lake Eleanor. That's the Sea of Galilee. All right? In those 37,000 sites, we have 5,000 that are biblical era. Biblical era from the Patriarch all the way to the 2nd century AD. Out of those 5,000 sites, none contradict the Bible. Not even one. So what we're going to do now, we are going to go in chronological order. I jumped from the Patriarch all the way to Joshua and his return to the Holy Land. Don't forget, Joshua didn't enter to the Holy Land for the first time. The nation of Israel came for the second time because of Jacob. He went down to Egypt, and they came back. All right? So when you look at book of Joshua, that's the beginning of the return of the Hebrews to Israel. Okay? We have to remember, Jews back then were not called Jews. They were called Hebrews. The name Jews came only after Rehoboam. Why? Judah. The kingdom of Judah. Any Latin language in the world spell Jews as J-U-D or J-U. Only in English is J-E-W. And it comes from the word Judah, Judea. So let's look at the book of Joshua. Joshua enters in, unlike his teacher Moses, he was a good navigator, and he enters into the Holy Land, and basically from Joshua 10, 11, and 12, actually it stretched all the way to almost 15, we see Joshua fighting against the local Canaanites. Now there were 7 different nations in Israel. The Canaanites, the Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Philistines. All right? So when he walks in, he basically starts to conquer the land. Now, there are 2 kinds of conquest in the Bible. There is to conquer the land, and there is to inherit the land. Conquer the land meaning you came, you destroyed the place, and that's it. Inherit the land, you conquered, and you settled your own people. All right? For example, Joshua conquered Jerusalem. He did. But there were not enough people for the tribe of Judah to settle in Jerusalem, so the Jebusite came back. Okay, so conquer and inherit, not the same thing. About half a year ago, less, three months ago, this fort that you see behind me was unearthed in a kibbutz, in a village next to my home. This is a castle, a Canaanite castle that is dated to the year 1200, roughly, BCE, which is the exact same time of the entry of Joshua into Israel. This castle is right across from the biblical city of Makkedah. Now, we know Makkedah from the Bible. This is the place where the 5 kings found their gruesome end. After they fought with Joshua, they fled to Makkedah, and Joshua kind of sealed them in the cave. I have a spoiler for you. When they opened the cave, they were there. It's not that story. It's a different one. We're going to come to it later. So this castle, we found it, and there was a thick layer of destruction, thick layer of ash, dated to the year 1200 BCE. Now, this castle is right on one side, on the Canaanite border of Makkedah, and on the other side of Gath. Who were the sworn enemies of the Israelites when they entered into the land of Israel? Which nation do you think? Sworn enemies. Philistines. Philistines were the sworn enemies. So what happened was, when Joshua enters into the land, he starts to take pieces of the country. So he makes those Canaanites weaker. The Philistines take advantage and also expand their kingdom. That's why we have book of Judges after that. Because the Philistines used that void. All right? So we found a biblical evidence of that clash between the Israelites and the Philistines in a Canaanite castle. This castle was not Jewish, and it was not Philistine. It was Canaanite. How do we know? Because of the vessel that we found over there. That round vessel is Canaanite. But we found a thick layer of ash. We don't know who destroyed it. The Philistines on one side or Joshua on the other side. But this brings to life Joshua 12. Next slide. Can you do the next one? This is one of the biggest discoveries that were found in Israel. And this is the city of Ziklag. Ziklag, just to begin with it, the name Ziklag is not Hebrew. It's not a Hebrew name. Ziklag is Greek. It's a Greek name. How do we know that? The city of Ziklag was given to King David by Achish, king of Gath. Gath were Philistines. Philistines were descended of Greek tribes, the Ionic, the Dorian tribes. They were associated with the Greeks. Ziklag has two layers of buildup, just two layers. One Philistine and one Israeli. How do you know the difference between a Philistine layer and a Jewish layer? What's that? Not artifacts, they were very similar. But let me think otherwise. Let me in a different way. What Jews will not eat? Pork. So if you find pieces of ribs, Memphis style, in a site, that's Philistine. And in Ziklag, it's incredible. We found a site. So you have one layer with tons of, they love their hand, they really did, with tons of pig bones, and above that, nothing, absolutely nothing. And this is exactly what the Bible said, that King Achish, king of Gath, gave Ziklag to David. But why Ziklag is so important? In the story, when David went up to help Saul in his war against the Philistines, he never reached all the way up. In the meantime, the Amalekites came and raided the city of Ziklag and took in captivity the men, the women, the children, and destroyed the place. David came back, fought against the Amalekites, and retrieved all his people. And then something very unique and very important happened. He basically gave the spoil of war to everybody equally. The warriors who were in the front said, this is not fair. We fought, we bled. Why they get the same share as we do? And this is one of the moments that David showed how great of a king he is. And he said, let me explain to you. Yes, you went and you bled and you fought against the Amalekites, but someone had to prepare your meal. Someone had to fix your armor. Someone needs to greet you when you come back to give you something, a place to sleep. So they participate in the war. Those logistical soldiers participated in the war no less than you did. This is an incredible way of thinking. This is something that never existed. And until today, in the Israeli army, the law is that if there is any kind of war, anyone who served in the military, doesn't matter what rank or what position, if you were in the military, you'll be honored as a veteran for that specific war. And that's because of Ziklag. Okay? Next slide. This is the city of Sha'araim, Kayafa. Those of you who are with us in Israel, we've seen it actually. When you go to Azekah and you look down at the place of the battle of David and Goliath, you can see Sha'araim. The Bible clearly says in 1 Samuel 17 that when the Philistines saw that the giant has been slain, they ran to Gath and Ekron and fell slain on the road to Sha'araim. Sha'araim in Hebrew means two gates. What is the most important place? Let me go even backward. What is the most expensive place in a city, in ancient cities? What do you think? People sometimes tell me the palace, the temple. No, it's the gates. You're going to put all your money and all your effort to build the best gates you can do. Because if not, you're not going to be there for a long time. So, and this is also the weakest point. The weakest point of a city is the gate. If you have a city with 2 gates, that's going to be their source of pride. Say, we have 2 gates. We are rich. All right? We are Kaifa Heights. Right? Kayafa Heights. So this city has 2 gates. And the Bible clearly speaks about the city with 2 gates, Sha'araim. We found it. Why is that so important? Because now we can point down at the Elah Valley today and say, this is the place of the battleground of David and Goliath. Because we're able to cross the scriptures together with archaeology. Next one. This is actually a chapter that every kid in the 5th grade in Israel has to memorize. They actually test us by this. You have to memorize this. This is the lamentation of David of Mount Gilboa. If you're going to ask most people where he wrote the lamentation, they will tell you in Mount Gilboa because of the battleground. But if someone will tell you something like that, clearly they didn't read their scriptures. What happened was that the Amalekites, it was an Amalekite boy, who ran from the battleground to Ziklag and told David what happened. And then David wrote this lamentation in the city that we just found. And this chapter is being recited by every Israeli kid at 5th grade. Next one. Sometimes, we have minimalists and we have maximalists. All right? Minimalists are archaeologists. They're usually going to be Tel Aviv University. They're walking with the Bible in one hand and a spade in the other, and they dig in the ground and they look at the Bible and say, okay, this is what it says. This is not what we found. That's minimalist. Maximalists will be exactly the opposite. Maximalists will walk with Bible in one hand, spade in the other. We're going to look at the ground. Okay, this is what it says. 1 and 1 plus is, equals 2. So just for us to understand the main differences. Okay, maximalist, if you walk like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a minimalist. If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a cow. All right? So one of the favorite thing about the minimalists is to take the Bible and try to break it, to say it never happened. I knew minimalist said King David never existed. We have a proof that's called the Dan inscription that speaks about King David, but this is for a different presentation. What I want to show you here, one of my favorite kings in the Bible is King Hezekiah. And King Hezekiah was a mighty king, was a strong king, and he also made preparation for war against Sennacherib, against Assyria. And what he did, he basically collected a lot of taxation and a lot of orders that were sent out throughout Judea to centralize and to get Jerusalem ready for the siege. You guys see that stamp with that beetle up there? That stamp said, Seal of King Hezekiah. So we actually have the seal, the original seal of King Hezekiah. Same king that was buddy with Isaiah. Same thing. And it's incredible because those minimalists will try to bash us and say it never happened. Well, yeah, I think God has different plans for that. But okay. So this is how we unearth the truth. By the way, a lot of it is done in the Sifton project, which I'll speak about in a second. So you see all these stamps on the side. They all bear names of people that we know from the Bible. Gemariah, son of Shaphan, who was the scribe of Jeremiah. We found the seal of Isaiah. We found a seal of Samson. Not in Jerusalem. Seal of Samson was in Beit Shemesh. But okay. So we have names from the Bible that we know about them, and we found them in the ground they were laid there for 3,000 years. Can you do the next slide? After King David, of course, we have the separation of the country. We have Israel and Judah, and King Sennacherib destroys the city of Lachish. Lachish was the mightiest city in Judea after Jerusalem. And what happened was, Lachish basically sacrificed themselves in order to save Jerusalem. If you remember the prophecy of Isaiah, Isaiah said, this army will not enter into the city. There will be no arrow, no flame. The same way he came, that's the same way he's going to leave. And that night, the angel of God struck them and killed in a plague, if I remember correctly, something like 180-something thousand people. And Isaiah woke up in the morning, Hezekiah woke up in the morning, and no Assyrian were there. In the palace of Nineveh, the palace of Sennacherib, there is a big tablet called the Lachish inscription. And he basically describes Lachish as the capital of Israel, not Jerusalem. Why? Because in the psychological understanding of warfare in the ancient world, you do not submit a nation until you destroy their capital. So what Sennacherib did, he was not able to destroy Jerusalem, so he posted Lachish as the capital of Judea. Folks, this is fake news 3,000 years ago. We have Twitter, they had huge plaques. Okay. One of the interesting things that were found in Lachish is an altar. You see the hand over there that points at the triangle? The altar is basically, as we know from the Bible, is a square with horns, 4 horns, right? This is an altar to our God. It's not the demigod. This is not pagan. That's belonged to our God. So why is it destroyed? Because of Josiah. Josiah basically centralized all of the worship into the house of God. And he said, you need to break it, you need to seal it, and that's it. No more monkey business. Everything is going back to Jerusalem. And what we did, we found this altar that was broken, not smashed. It wasn't in a war. Someone broke it in order to make it unusable, and they built a latrine next to it. Really, they built a latrine next to it in order to take any holiness away. By the way, they never used that latrine. How do we know? There's no organic material underneath it. But just to prove a point that they listened to the king. So we have physical evidence of the reformation of Josiah. Can you do the next one? So this is one altar. This is a full city. The city of Arad. We just spoke about an altar. There was a full temple. That temple behind me, those pillars that you see, this is a temple to the God of Israel. This is not a pagan temple. But again, sealed respectfully, locked, and that's it for 3,000 years until we unearthed it. City of Arad. Arad is when you go from the south basin of the Dead Sea to Jerusalem via the Ela Valley. It's right before the Ela Valley. So you have Ela Valley and Arad is underneath. Next place, next slide. Many people ask me, do Jews follow the understanding of the end of times? The awesome great day of the Lord. So said Malachi 3:23. Let me tell you this. There was a very famous Jewish rabbi, a Jewish teacher, who said, I'm not here to change anything, not even the smallest letter in the Hebrew alphabet. I'm here to repeat the prophets before me. You know the name of that rabbi who said that? There you go. Exactly right. Yeshua of Nazareth. He's the one who said that. And when you look at the Bible, that's why we understand that Genesis to Revelation is the same book. Because Jesus, Yeshua, keep on going back to recite words of the prophet before him. Even in Caesarea Philippi, who asks, who am I? And they tell him, you are Jeremiah, you are Elijah, you are John. Because he kept on going back and explaining things of prophets before him. So do Jews believe in the end days? Of course. If you open today, after this session, go home, open one Bible in book of Zechariah 12, other Bible, book of Revelation 16. It's almost the same chapter. It's almost the same chapter. I got to say, Revelation 16 is a lot more interesting and a lot more vivid than Zechariah. This is going to be the Hollywood version. This is going to be the Bollywood version. But same idea. Actually, not just Zechariah. We have Ezekiel. We have Isaiah. We have Daniel. These are all apocalyptic books that were written 500 years before Jesus, 600 years before Revelation. So this idea of end of days, it's embedded, of course, in the Old Testament, in the Bible. Next slide. After the destruction of Judea and of Israel, we have the exile and then slowly the return of Israel to Judea. And this here is a prophecy by Isaiah about the connection between Jesus and David. And you know where this will resonate? With Paul. When you're going to read Romans 9 and Romans 11, it's basically Paul repeating what Isaiah said. That's the connection of the tree of life and the grafted in, especially the grafted in. Okay? That's the foundation of it. Next one. Jesus is a child. Those of you who are with us in Israel saw that one of the unique things about visiting Israel is not just to see the sights. You can see a church anywhere. By the way, we barely see any churches. If there's one thing that was not there in the time of Jesus, it's a Catholic church. So we try to avoid that. I want to show you an example of a site. You see that mosaic right above me? This is the town of Tzipori, Sepphoris. It's a city that is not mentioned in the Bible, not even once. But this is the city that shaped Jesus as a boy. Because when you are there, you can understand why, first of all, the Bible says what good can come out of Nazareth. Apparently, a lot good can come out of Nazareth. But also, he kept on being described as teaching as one of an authority and not as one of the scribes. Why this is so important? Because a scribe, who is the biggest scribe in the Bible? The biggest one. Paul. Paul is a government clerk. Completely. I come from the government originally. I know what I'm talking about. He's even not just government. He works for the Ministry of Treasury. The worst kind. And he says that. Paul says that. I am the Pharisee of Pharisees. And he is a scribe. Because he was the student of Rabbi Gamaliel. Who taught Jesus? Joseph? How does Jesus know to speak to all the multitude, Jews and non-Jews alike? It's two different worlds. How can Jesus approach to Latin Romans and to approach to Greeks and approach to Samaritans and everybody respect him? How can that be? This answer will be found in Tzipori, because Tzipori was the largest city in the Galilee, which is right next to Nazareth. And when Jesus used to go and work for a living, you need to work out of something to get something to eat, he used to work in Tzipori. And then he learned about theaters, taxation, Jews, non-Jews, Pharisees, Sadducees, everything together. And that, when you see Tzipori, you understand the parables in the future. For example, that piece of mosaic that you see right above us describes a feast. It's basically gluttony. It's a feast, huge feast in a very rich neighborhood. When you look at this and you read the parable of Lazarus and the rich man in hell, you understand the origin of that parable. When the dogs in hell are licking the wounds of the rich man, these are the same dogs that the rich man gave the crumbs to the dogs in his home, but not even one crumb to Lazarus, who was sitting outside. When you read that parable and you look at this, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Another thing, all the surrounding around Tzipori is, the most common weed around Tzipori is mustard. Rings a bell? The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard tree. He used that because that's what he saw. And only then you can understand why he is described as someone who's spoken as an authority and not as a scribe. Because there's a big difference if you sit down in a synagogue and all day long you're in your books and you learn about it, rather than you actually walk in the ground, and you can feel it in your legs. Huge difference. And that's why Jesus had so much authority over so many people. Because he came from underneath. He came from within. One of the things that Jesus did when he came to the villages in the Galilee, what did he do? First thing that he does when he goes into a village, what does he do? He's a rabbi. What does he do? Teaches. Jesus walked in the villages in the Galilee, entered into synagogues, and taught. And in most cases, he was very well accepted. We have to remember, most of the disciples of Jesus were Pharisees. It's not the Pharisees that pressed for Jesus to be condemned to the cross. It's the Pharisees' leaders. Huge difference. Why? Jesus was a reformator. He kept on saying, you're preaching for me that I'm not allowed to heal a man on Sabbath, but you want to tell me that if your sheep will fall into a pit, you're not going to pick it up on Sabbath? Seriously? He broke their leadership in front of their congregation. So they were pretty much upset with him. But then again, that same challenge that he called on them, that was the fuel that so many people came to see him. He had a lot of guts. He really did. So people came from the Decapolis, came from the Jewish villages, non-Jewish villages, multitude of thousands of people coming to hear him. He was one of the most popular rabbis in Israel. And in a few slides, we'll see what happened after the crucifixion. That picture behind me, those pictures behind me, the small one on the left-hand side, this is the village of Magdala. Now, this village was destroyed in the year 66 AD, never to be rebuilt again. We know that Jesus was in Magdala. How do we know that? House of Mary. Mary supported him, right? So if we know that Jesus been to the village of Magdala, to the house of Mary, and we know that Jesus taught in the synagogues, where do we think that Jesus had been when he was in Magdala? In the synagogue. And we found the synagogue from the time of Jesus. Nothing built on top of it. That's the synagogue that Jesus taught in. So today you can go and actually touch stones and see benches that Jesus himself sat on it. That's not an assumption. We know this fact. Another structure right there on the right-hand side, this is the mighty city of Gamla. Gamla, if you remember, in the Beatitude, city on the hill. This is the city on the hill. That's the city that he's talking about. And that huge structure in the back, that's the synagogue of Gamla. And again, you can sit on the same benches that Jesus taught. Next slide. This is a brand new discovery. Brand new discovery, I'm talking 2-3 weeks ago. This year was, and it's funny to say that 2020 was a good year, because it was not, but in terms of rain in Israel, it was a good year. Yay, 1 point to 2020, yay. Okay, so the water of the Sea of Galilee came so high that now when it's receding, it takes silt with them, we found Bethsaida. When we were in Israel in January, was it? January, we haven't been to Bethsaida. You know why? We had no idea where it is. It's a pretty hard thing to visit a place that you don't know where it is. But now we have new discoveries that found Bethsaida. So God willing, next time we're there, we're going to visit Bethsaida. Next slide. This picture is for Pastor Todd. The Capernaum, Lord of Sabbath. This synagogue is actually not the synagogue that Jesus taught, because that synagogue is built on top of an older synagogue. If you can see actually in that picture, the lower part is black. You see the black part? That's the synagogue of Jesus. Above it is white. It's a later synagogue. But how fun it is to sit there and debate. That's what Jews do. We debate all the time. That's why we have so many lawyers. All right? Why we debate? If you ask a Jew, if you ask me if you ask me a question, I'm going to answer you with a question. You know why? It gives you time to think of an answer for the first question. But this is it's embedded in our culture. How does Jesus teach in the synagogues? What does he do? Does he preach? He asks questions all the time, all the time. Every time he is with the disciples, he is asking questions all the time. Why? Steel sharpens steel. You learn better by asking questions. That's why it's impossible to teach a group of kids in Israel. Impossible. If you're a teacher, God help you. And the Holy Spirit and everybody. Next slide. This is a boat that was found in 1986 when the water receded completely. This is a boat of a fisherman that lived there around between the year 40 AD to 60 AD. We don't know exactly the year. Now, it's funny that the people who found it call it the Jesus boat, which makes absolutely no sense, because Jesus was not a fisherman. He didn't own a boat. He actually asked permission to use the boat of Peter. He didn't own a boat. But can we say that this is a boat that was used by a fisherman who knew Jesus? Hands down, yes. We know that. Is there a way or an assumption that Jesus might even have been on that boat, or he knew that boat? Yes, he associated with fishermen. Is this his boat? No, it's not. He didn't own a boat. But you can see today a real boat, the same one that is described in the Bible, "O ye of little faith." This is the boat that the Bible speaks about. This is the model of the boat that the Bible speaks about. Next one. His last week in Israel, in Jerusalem, from the triumphal entry, the Hosanna, all the way down to the crucifixion and resurrection. In Jerusalem, you'll find some incredible sights. One of them, the pool of Siloam, the real pool of Siloam, where you take the water and then pour it on the altar. This is the place in John 9 where Jesus healed the blind. You can go to visit pool of Bethesda in John 5, with the gushing of the water, with the angel, with the paralytic. So Jerusalem itself is a paradise for archaeology. And over there, you really see, can really feel the last week of Jesus, from Gethsemane all the way down. Actually, that building over there, we've been there in the closed discoveries. This is a close to the public discoveries. Next to the sifting, you see those people sifting the dirt. I'm going to speak about it in a sec. Next to this, there's a huge hole. That hall is basically built on top of the palace of Herod from the time of Jesus. What happened in the trial of Jesus when Pontius met him? What did Pontius do? He sent Jesus to where? To Herod's. He learned that Herod, who was the king of the Galilee, was there in Jerusalem, and he sent Jesus to him. So when Jesus approached as a prisoner to Herod, would he will be greeted in the main foyer, or will he be going to the cellars? To the cells down below, right? To the basement. We found the basement of the palace of Herod. Can we say this is the jail of Jesus? Was he kept here? No, we cannot. Can we say these are cells from the time of Jesus, and maybe this had anything to do with the trial? Yes, we can. This is brand new discovery, which is close to the public. We were there, but it's close to the public, technically. The Sifting project next to this is actually one of the biggest archaeological endeavors in Israel for the past, I would say, 10 years. What happened was that the Islamic Waqf took out dirt from Temple Mount in order to erase Jewish history. And they threw it to the valley of Kidron next to it. So we scooped everything, 800 trucks of archaeological material. We brought it up to Mount Scopus, and groups, together with us, with the Bible Come to Life, when they come to Israel, they sift the dirt and they found real evidence and pieces of the temple. So I actually brought some with me. This is aside from this presentation. I promised to help Moriah, the one who is funding this. Well, we'll speak about it later after the presentation. But they have some pieces here. Next slide. Resurrection. What you see over there, it's a piece of a bone that we found belonging to a Jewish man, a Jewish name in his 30s, that was crucified around the year 40 AD with a nail in it. Is that Jesus? No, he resurrected. Right? It's kind of hard to find his body. I mean, they tried. It didn't really work. This is a bone of a young man by the name John, son of Chagakol. We know it because we found it in the ossuary. It says, John, son of Chagakol. This discovery is unbelievable because up until this discovery, this is the only bone with a nail in existence in the world from the Roman world. In the world, not just in Israel. So up until that discovery, people assumed that Jesus was crucified like this, with the feet and the nail in the middle. This one shows completely different. This one actually, imagine the cross, legs on both sides, and two nails are piercing on both sides, not from the front. It changes completely the image of crucified Jesus. That's the only one in existence. It's today in the Israel Museum. By the way, right next to the ossuary of Caiaphas, the real Caiaphas, right next to it. Next slide. Oh, wait, before that, I want to show you, okay, so this is the garden tomb on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, this is the tomb in the Ela Valley. The tomb in the Ela Valley is not the tomb of Jesus. Jesus was crucified in Golgotha in Jerusalem, not Ela Valley. However, who owned the tomb of Jesus? Joseph of Arimathea, who was a rich man. This tomb in the Ela Valley belonged to a rich Jewish family from the year around 40 AD. So when you are visiting that tomb, the one on the left with the seal, it shows you exactly what the Bible describes. When the Bible speaks about a tomb that no man had been laid down before with a seal, this is it. For me, it's even more powerful than the garden tomb. Because there's always this big debate. Where is the place of resurrection? Is it the garden tomb or is it the Holy Sepulchre? The fact is we will never find a skeleton because he resurrected. So we will never be able to solve this. But the fact is that we're not here to commemorate the place, we're here to commemorate the event. Okay? So garden tomb is an amazing place where we usually have communion. Ela Valley, for me, is even stronger than the garden tomb because I can see the vivid picture. Next slide. So after resurrection, of course, we have this story of Acts. Here I want to show you that road that goes underneath this castle. This is the road to Damascus, Acts 9. Behind me, there is, next to it is the city of Caesarea. This is Acts 10 with Cornelius. You remember I told you the crucifixion of Jesus didn't just affect a physical earthquake. It's actually a political earthquake. Why? Right before the crucifixion, Jesus, of course, used to associate with Jews, non-Jews. There was a complete dialogue between the two worlds. Not a problem. He kept on crossing to the other side all the time. No one said anything. When the centurion is sending when Cornelius sends the soldiers to take Peter, Peter is terrified. And he says to Cornelius, I'm a Jew. I'm not allowed to be associated with non-Jews. Hold on. Just a few chapters before, we saw this diffusion between what's going on? Crucifixion of Jesus, the execution of Jesus as a rabbi, as a leader, caused a political earthquake in all of Judea. Up to Jesus, yes, you can associate. From Jesus onward, you cannot. This is incredible. When you read the scriptures in Acts 10, you can really see that. It's really incredible. Next slide. After the book of Acts, well, during the book of Acts, we have the journeys of Paul, and of course, at the end, we have the book of Revelation. I want to take this part to speak about the book of Revelation. For many people, book of Revelation is the most difficult book in the Bible because most people have no idea what do you mean, right? Actually, by visiting Turkey and understand the cities themselves physically, it becomes one of the easiest books of the Bible. We're going to analyze some of the letters, and then you can see it. But once you are there, you understand Revelation like never before. All right? So here's a quick question. Who wrote the Revelation? Jesus did. He dictated to John. This is a trick question. I always ask that. I know. All right, fine. So there are 7 churches of Revelation. When you're going to go to one of those churches, what you will not find, for sure, a church. Why? Why? Because the Greek word is, the translation that the Greeks chose to the Hebrew is the wrong translation. I'm going to give you an example. When Jesus sits with his disciples in Caesarea Philippi, he says to Peter, upon this rock I shall build my community. Community, not church. Church is a building. It's a community. So when you read the Revelation to the angel of the church of Laodicea, for example, it's not an angel with wings sitting on a church. Angel is the representative, the leader of. So we're going to read it to the leader of the community of Laodicea, not the church of Laodicea. All right? Why am I saying this? You'll see in a second. Can you do the next slide, please? This is the city of Laodicea. Anyone wants to read what it says? Come on. Yes, please. No. And to the leader of the community. Yes, okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. Everybody understood what it says? Usually when I'm in church, when we read this, the pastor read this, go in peace, everybody go out. It's like, oh yeah, sure. I had no idea what you just said. The letters are addressed to the core of the church. The 7 churches, it's not a church, it's a community. The 7 communities that the letters are addressed to were the foundation of the church. And when John, when Jesus approached to those communities via John, he actually addressed them privately, that they will understand exactly what he's talking about. It's not a general letter. It's not letter to the Ephesians or the letter to the Corinthian. It's addressed to a specific community with a specific role. Let's analyze Laodicea. Behind Laodicea, you see a big mountain with snow on top of it. You see that? This is the Mount of Colossae. The city of Colossae is right at the foot of that mountain. Across from it, there's a place called Denali, which is a cluster, one of the biggest clusters of hot springs in Turkey. Laodicea is right in the middle where the cold water from the snow meets the hot springs from Denali. So let's read this again. Look at that. You are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were cold or hot, so So then, because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you and I'll vomit you out of my mouth. Meaning, the letter goes to that community that sits in Laodicea and basically tells them, choose your side. You're either with me or you're not with me. If I knew which side you are standing, it would be much easier for me. If you are on the cold side, you don't follow me, okay, I know what to do. If you're on the hot side, you follow me, I know what to do. This is specifically to the people of Laodicea. And when this reached Laodicea, they know exactly that they're in the meeting point of the lukewarm waters, of the hot spring and the cold spring. Let's do another one. Pergamon. I'm going to read this. And to the leader of the community of Pergamon write, this thing says, he who has the sharp two-edged sword, I know your works and where you dwell, where Satan's throne is. In Pergamon was one of the largest temples for Hades in the Roman world. Today, this temple is intact in Berlin. They took it brick by brick, the Germans, brick by brick, and built it in Berlin in a museum called the Pergamon Museum. When you go today to Pergamon, you'll be at the place where that shrine of demigods of Hades used to be. That was the pride of the city. And this is what it says. Look at this. I know where you dwell. You are dwell where Satan's throne is. And if you remember, Jesus said, upon this rock I will build my community, and even Hades cannot overcome it. All right? So that's the connection that we have with Pergamon. Let's do one more. Ephesus. Together. To the leader of community of Ephesus write, these things say, he who holds the 7 stars in the right hand, he who walks in the midst of the 7 golden lampstands. Stars were symbol of wealth and power in the Roman Empire. You can see that actually on their SPQR, you can see the stars around it. Okay, it was a symbol of wealth. One of the largest libraries in the world was one in Alexandria and the other one in Ephesus. It still exists. That library in Ephesus still exists. And we know that one of the symbols of knowledge is light, a torch, until today. You go to universities, their symbol is a torch, because knowledge shows you the way. So let's now read it again after we know these things. The pride and joy of the Ephesians, apart from Artemis, this is a different chapter, the pride and joy of the Ephesians was this center of knowledge. What does it say? It says here, he who holds the 7 stars, you are bragging that you are so rich, on one hand, and walks in the midst of the 7 golden lampstands. You're walking around and say, I will teach you, I'm big, I'm strong, I'm amazing. So he addressed that exactly to the points of, help me out here, the pride points of that community. The arrogance, thank you, exactly right. He knows exactly where to hit. And each and every one of those letters addressing to those communities hits that point exactly. Well, now, the book of Revelation is basically connected to the Beatitude. Why? In the Beatitude, Jesus explains how to behave, how man to man should behave in order to bring the kingdom of God down. That's the Beatitudes. Revelation is, if you will not do that, this was going to happen to you. You chose the way, you chose the light, true, but I am upset with you because A, B, C, D. Okay? It's a correction. And again, why did he correct those specific churches, communities? Because they were not just arrogant. What were they for the church? They were the foundation of the church. They were basically the continuation of the disciples. So now when you go to read the book of Revelation, you can understand that each and every one of them spoke to a specific community and explained to them specifically how to change. For example, if you take it to the education world today, it's like preaching to a class what to do, or sitting with the leaders of the class and say, you should do this, you should do this, you should do that. That's the book of Revelation.
Let me use a mic, which, by the way, are you ready for the test? That's what I thought. I just love his mind. Questions? We want to get this for the recording as well as those who are online can only hear. But anyone have any questions for him? We got about 6-7 minutes. Really?
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
I was going to say, here we go.
I have a question. You just talked about so much, like an outline or something that we could.
Outline?
I'll give you like 14 books that will cover what he just. No, she's saying an outline of what you just all did.
Like a summary?
You're going to have to go on the trip.
Yeah.
I mean that. I go, it's just, especially covering from Israel to there. I wish we did. There are no notes. It's all in his head. He's like Amy Conant Barrett, just has a little piece of paper in front of her. It's same type of deal. But thank you. Good question. Next. Ladies first.
Hello.
Hello.
I read a couple of days ago, this is now, that there was books that were found under the Vatican. Have you heard anything like that?
We know of the 4 Gospels that are in the canonized Bible. We do know of other Gospels that were not got their way into the Bible. For example, the Gospel of James. Not the James that we know, there's another one. There's the Gospel of Peter. There was a place in Egypt called El Hamadi, that found a lot of letters that are dated to that time. But from some reason, they didn't end up in the canonization of the Bible. Maybe one of the reasons is that they were never found. They just didn't reach to the committee that basically sealed the Bible. So are there outside sources? Yes, there are.
So that is true?
Yeah.
I heard that it was truckloads.
I don't know about truckloads. That's PR for the Vatican. I know of few, not truckloads, no.
I'll make one quick comment to that because canonicity, how the Bible books came together, old and new, is one of my favorite majors. The difficulty, and like he mentioned, of Nag Hammadi and other, how did you pronounce it though?
Nag Hammadi.
Yeah,
Hammadi,
same. Hammadi.
Hammadi.
Is the early church, often in Asia Minor, where we're going in Turkey, dealt together as councils with the New Testament to deal with some of those later books. Early church fathers are what are called apostolic fathers, like Irenaeus, Tertullian, others in the 2nd century. You actually can see the collections of books that were confirmed, not created. And so some of these other gospels were not, they were literally denied, like the Gnostic gospels. But as he mentioned, there's some writings, like in Colossians 4:16, they mention a letter of Laodiceans.
Yes. Yeah.
And we don't know where that was, And I go, so if things surface, it's a pretty big deal. Not quite like finding the Ark of the Covenant,
No,
but
no.
It's a very fascinating study, and because they were writings back then that were then used in an authoritative way, and ultimately elevated in the New Testament as old. It's not my hour. Anyway, Chuck.
He said something about Zechariah 12 and Revelation. I forget what quote
16.
it was, that they're the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same idea. If you read Zechariah 12, it speaks about the great gathering of the armies at Megiddo, and it's basically the foundation of Revelation 16. Revelation 16 is that they assemble together at the place called in Hebrew Har Megiddo, which is Armageddon. That's in Revelation, Armageddon. In Zechariah, it will say Megiddo, not Armageddon. Megiddo, the Hebrew name, Megiddo. Mm-hmm.
Y'all getting all this, right? Can you imagine? This is an hour. Do you see why? See why when we spent with him this there's a lot, and the whole point is there is a ton of proof. This is things in my atheist background. I mean, I didn't know. I had to go out and learn. I'm like, there's tons of proof for this, and over and over and over again. Question.
גדול אלוהי, שירו כי גדול אלוהי, כל אחד יראה כי גדול אלוהי. שם מעל כל שם, אותך ראוי להלל. ליבי ישיר כי גדול אלוהי. שם מעל כל שם, אותך ראוי להלל. ליבי ישיר כי גדול אלוהי. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God, and all will see how great is our God. Gadol Elohai, Shiru ki gadol Elohai, kol echad yireh ki gadol Elohai, שירו כי גדול אלוהי, כל אחד יראה כי גדול גדול אלוהי. גדול אלוהי, שירו כי גדול אלוהי, כל אחד יראה כי גדול אלוהי. גדול
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהים מלך העולם, שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהים מלך העולם, המחבר חברים, קרובים, ידידים, משפחה, לעבוד את שמו ולמענו, למען ביאת מלכות השמיים במהרה בימינו ונאמר אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהים מלך העולם, שהכל נעשה בדברו ולמען שמו. ברך את הקהילה הנפלאה הזו, ברך את האנשים הנפלאים הנמצאים בקהילה הזו, השוקדים על שמך יומם ולילה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהים מלך העולם, שהכל נהיה בדברו. אמן.
Amen.